I loved her against reason, against promise, against peace, against hope, against happiness, against all discouragement that could be. That is Pip, speaking of Estella, and I wrote that sentence in 1860, when I was 48 years old, and had just fallen in love with a woman half my age who would never quite love me back. I did not intend to write a novel about myself, but somehow I always do. Where were you when you wrote this? What was happening in England, and in your own life? England in 1860 was a country drunk on progress. Steam engines, gas lamps, railways threading every corner of the island. The middle class, my class, was rising. You could be born poor and die rich. That had never quite been true before. And yet, the gap between a gentleman and a labourer was still an abyss, not merely of money, of speech, of table manners, of the school you attended, of the way you held a fork. A man could have a fortune and still be dismissed as common. I knew this personally. When I was 12 years old, my father was taken to debtor's prison. My family moved in with him, as families did. But I was put to work in a blacking warehouse, pasting labels on bottles, alongside boys far beneath my sense of myself. I was 12. I thought I was too good for it. That shame and the rage underneath it never fully left me. And 36 years later, I poured it all into a boy called Pip. I will also confess something practical. My magazine had been losing readers. I needed a serial that would sell. So Great Expectations was written under pressure, in weekly installments, with no safety net. That, I think, is why it moves so quickly. Necessity is a very fine editor. Before we get into the story, what does the title actually mean? It is a joke. Or rather, it is a trap. In Victorian England, when people said someone had great expectations, they meant he was about to inherit a fortune. It was a legal and financial term, a respectable term. The title announces, this is a story about a young man who is coming into money. And it is. But the expectations Pip carries go far beyond money. He expects to become a gentleman. He expects to deserve Estella. He expects that the world, once it sees him properly dressed and properly spoken, will finally recognize what he always believed himself to be. Every single one of those expectations is wrong. Not partially wrong, structurally wrong, built on a foundation he cannot see yet. So the title is accurate in the narrow sense and devastating in the wider one. I was quite pleased with it. Walk us through the story. Who is Pip? Pip is an orphan. He lives on the marshes of Kent with his sister, a hard woman who raises him by hand, as she puts it, meaning with a great deal of hitting, and her husband Joe, a blacksmith. Joe is gentle. Joe is good. Pip loves him. Then two things happen that split his world open. First, in a graveyard at Christmas, a convict rises out of the mist and seizes him by the throat. His name is Magwitch. He is terrifying. Pip brings him food and a file to cut his chains, out of sheer terror, and Magwitch is recaptured. Pip thinks the story is over. It is not over. What was the second thing that changed everything for Pip? Ah, yes, the second thing. In some ways, the more dangerous of the two. Pip is summoned to Satis House, the home of Miss Havisham, the richest woman in the county. She was jilted on her wedding day. At the precise moment she learned her fiancé would not come, she stopped every clock in the house. She has not moved since. The wedding cake still rots on the table. She still wears the dress, one shoe on, one shoe off. And she has raised a girl, Estella, as her adopted daughter, as her instrument of revenge. Miss Havisham took Estella as an infant and shaped her, deliberately and with great care, into something that could not be hurt, because it could not love. She is the most beautiful person Pip has ever seen. She knows it and feels nothing about it. From the first visit, Estella makes clear what she thinks of him. She calls his hands coarse, his boots thick. She laughs at the way he speaks. She makes him feel with the precision of a surgeon that he is common, and that common is the worst thing a person can be. And Pip believes her. That is the tragedy of it. He goes home, looks at Joe's forge, looks at his own hands, and sees them the way Estella saw them. Suddenly, everything he came from is something to escape. Pip presses her later, declares his feelings, and Estella says something that should have stopped him entirely. She says, "I have no heart." Not that it is cold, not that it is taken, that she was never given one, that Miss Havisham made sure of it. Something shifts in Dickens's expression. Estella is, in some ways, the saddest character in the book. She is a weapon who knows she is a weapon and cannot become anything else. She does not enjoy the cruelty. She simply cannot feel the alternative. Pip loves her anyway. Against reason, against hope, against all discouragement that could be. As I said at the beginning, he goes home ashamed of Joe's forge, ashamed of his rough hands, ashamed of himself. That shame is where the story truly begins. Joe visits Pip in London. What happens? Joe comes to London once, just once. He sits in Pip's fine rooms, holding his hat with both hands the entire visit, turning it round and round, because he does not know what to do with himself in a place where everything is expensive and nothing is familiar. Pip is mortified. He is embarrassed that his friends might see them together, and Joe, who is not a stupid man, feels it. Before he leaves, Joe says to him, "Pip, dear old chap, life is made of ever so many partings welded together. And one man's a blacksmith, and one's a whitesmith, and one's a goldsmith, and one's a coppersmith. Divisions among such must come." He is speaking in the only language he knows, the language of the forge. A blacksmith works iron. A whitesmith works tin. A goldsmith works gold. Each man has his craft, his place, his dignity. But the tools are different. The fire is different. The worlds do not mix. Joe is telling Pip, "You have become a different metal than me." I understand that. I am not asking you to pretend otherwise. I am only asking you not to be ashamed of what I am. Then he puts on his hat and he goes, and he never comes to London again. Joe has more dignity in that exit than Pip manages in the entire middle section of the novel. He knows his worth. He does not need Pip to confirm it. That is the thing about truly good people. They do not require your recognition to remain good. And Magwitch, how does he come back? A lawyer named Jaggers had arrived years earlier with news. A secret benefactor has granted Pip a large fortune. He is to go to London. He is to become a gentleman. Pip assumes, of course he assumes, that the benefactor is Miss Havisham. That this is a fairy story, and he is the prince. And then, when he is 23, the door opens and Magwitch walks in. The convict from the graveyard. The man Pip has not thought of in a decade. Magwitch is his benefactor, not Miss Havisham, a criminal. A man transported to Australia, who worked himself to wealth there and sent every penny to make a gentleman. his gentleman, as an act of pure, eccentric, magnificent love. Pip is horrified, and that horror tells him everything about who he has become. What is the one thing someone should truly understand after reading this book? That we confuse the appearance of goodness with goodness itself, always, instinctively, without knowing we are doing it. In this novel, the convict is loyal, the gentleman is hollow. The rotting house is called Satis, which means satisfied, enough, and I assure you nothing in it satisfied anyone. The man with the forge and the rough hands is the one with the cleanest soul. I gave Pip half the novel looking at Joe and feeling shame, and the other half learning that Joe was the finest person in the room, always. I was not writing about social class, though people think I was. I was writing about the cruelty of aspiration, the way we hollow ourselves out, chasing an image of ourselves that is not us, was never us, and comes at the cost of the people who actually love us. The title is the joke I played on myself. Great expectations. We all have them. They are almost never about what we think they are about. Why should someone read Great Expectations right now, in this century? Because Pip is on your phone. He is on every platform that shows you a better version of a life you do not have. He is in every algorithm that makes you feel your own kitchen is not as beautiful as a stranger's. The disease I gave him, the belief that worth is external, that a man is only as valuable as what he can display, is the founding logic of the modern world. But I did not write a tragedy. That is the thing people miss. I did not leave him broken. I let him wake up. He returns to Joe. He learns at some cost that the life he despised was the life worth living. I gave it two endings in the end. The first was harsher. They meet briefly and part. My friend Bulwer Lytton told me readers would want something softer, and I relented, perhaps unwisely. But in either version, the transformation is real. The boy who was ashamed of a good man becomes a man who understands what goodness costs. Read it for Magwitch, if nothing else. He is one of my finest creations, a man the world called worthless, who loved more extravagantly than anyone in the book. I did not know I was writing him until he arrived. That is the gift of serial publication. Your characters surprise you. Read it because you have been Pip, or you will be, and the novel will tell you with great gentleness that there is still time to go back to Joe.